took it out to the field, river in Tui. Now this Nelson, the mail pilot, was flying with Klingenberg on a mail route between St. Louis and Chicago. He was a small, light fella. So Heath asked him whether he'd test fly with him. So I remember it was on a Sunday, and we had assembled the planes, and he got in it, had the motor wide open. All of us student pilots, we gave the thing a shove yet so he'd get a good start on the ground, but all he could keep gaining was about a foot or foot and a half altitude, plunked down, foot and a half plunked down. Couldn't get enough speed you could get over the fence, even the fence on the end of the field. So then we had to take it back up in the factory again, and then you whittled it down again some more. And the next time I took it out there, the same thing. We gave him a shove again to get going. And I remember it was a south wind, he was taking off to the south. Well, he got off and he got over the fence post and couldn't get any higher than the top of the trees, and he couldn't get enough altitude to even come back. So all he could do is, when he found an open field ahead of him, all he could do is point this thing down in the field ahead of him. And so there we had to, again, take the thing apart and put it in the truck and take it back up on Broadway and whittle it down some more. So we finally got it so through. Then it looked like a mosquito in the air, you know, with small things, four-cylinder Henderson motorcycle motor. While I was over at that field, I had a fellow too, he was taking up flying. His name was Warren Hotchkiss. But he didn't have money enough to pay for flying instructions, so then he decided he'd do some parachute jumping for some of these pilots out there, and they'd give him flying time every Sunday when he'd make a parachute jump. Now those days, exhibition jump was all, the parachutes were all made out of cotton. We didn't have any silk shoots those days. So you would tie this here parachute pack, which was real thick. You'd tie it right on the leading edge of the wing here to the strut. And I'll tell you how they packed that chute. On account of being cotton, you first had to fold it lengthways over and over and over, and then you put the top of the parachute with the hole at the top up in the bottom of the pack, and you kept folding the other parachute back and forth till you got down the shroud cord. By that time the pack was getting pretty big already, being cotton cloth. So then you put a layer of shroud cords in there, then you take a whole newspaper, whole complete newspaper, and put that over there, and then another layer of shroud cord, another layer of newspaper, and so on, so you come way down the end. And you had so many newspapers in there, and that parachute pack was so doggone big. That's why they had to tie it. You couldn't carry it on your body, you know, and jump that way. That's why they tie it to the front strut of the plane. So when you get up there high enough for this parachute jumper to make a jump, he'd get out of the cockpit, and then he'd walk, well, he had a harness on, and then he had a snap on this harness, a big snap like you used to have on horses' harnesses, you know, big snap in that. And there was a ring all sticking out of this here parachute pack. And the rest of the parachute was tied in with a shoestring. So this here fellow would get out of the cockpit, then he'd walk all the way along the wing, the front wing, and then he'd have to climb over the edge of the front wing, and no parachute on him, so he didn't dare lose his handhold. So he'd be hanging onto that strut with one hand, and then he'd leave his body hanging up over the end, and with the one hand you'd have to snap in that ring. And that's where he'd be hanging then until the pilot would get right over the crowd of people, and then he let go. And with his weight dropping, that'd break the shoestring. They didn't untie the shoestring. His body weight would break the shoestring and allow it to come this here parachute and the paper. It looked like confetti from the ground. The whole area would be just swimming full of this here paper. And parachute, being cotton, they don't open up too good. That thing coming above him like this would be flying, and he'd be coming down. Finally the opened up. And that Warren Hotchkiss, well, he went by the, we always call him Bugs Raymond. There wasn't too many of them that make jumps those days, but he would make jumps, and he was a pretty decent fellow. Oh, he used to come out here to see us right along here later years before he passed away.
Did they ever lose any of those guys when they were walking the wing after that parachute?
Ever lose them?
Yeah.
I've never known that we have lost any of ours that we had. So one time, he said to me, he said, Bill, I'm going over to Cary. Next to Barrington, I'm going to make a parachute jump out there. And there was a fellow by, oh, I can't think of his name right now. He was flying for Stewart. Stewart owned the garage in Cary. And all north of the town, the business section there, were all open fields. And so at that time, I had this here plane. And I'll tell you, I might tell you a little bit about this plane, the one that Klingenberg instructed students, and that was the biggest lemon I ever had. When I was flying that plane up from St. Louis up here to Elgin Airport, not where the airport was now, it was on McLean Boulevard at that time, just south of Route 20. When I was flying up here, the motor cut out on me about halfway up from St. Louis to Elgin. And what happened? Those OX5 motors, they have 4 jets. Have you ever seen the jets in carburetor, the OX5? They're little holes, you know, in a long jet. And in cold weather, and down below is a nut, a well nut, where some of the moisture will drop. And if there's moisture in your gasoline, although we strained the gasoline through chamois skin years ago, every bit of it had to be strained through chamois skin. Still, there'd be a little moisture to get fuel. Every day before we'd fly a plane, we'd always take those well nuts off and empty the water out and shove it back up there. Whenever you get a little moisture in there and it's cold, like in March, some of that moisture would suck up in that jet, and that jet hole being so small, all of a sudden it would freeze. That water would freeze, and out would go a whole bank. You had an idling jet, and you had a high-speed jet for each 4 engines, for each bank. So when one bank can go out, the other bank can be alive. But this bank is, besides taking care of the propeller, which they're supposed to take care of, has to run these other 4 dead cylinders over here now. So the motor's just practically idling. So that happened so often on those OX5 motors, you never knew when they were going to stop. And it was in March. It was March 9th when I was coming up, and cold up in the air, and that's what happened here. After I landed on the ground, it was warm a little bit. I emptied it out, I emptied out the water, then I could start and head on again. Then I'll tell you what happened during the time I had that. It was so big, I couldn't put it very well in the hangar at 43'10" wind spread. It would go in there, but we had other airplanes in there, but this one took up so much room. We had some of the other airplanes standing on their nose in there, one alongside the other. And so I had it tied outside. And one night we had a terrific wind, and it was tied against a fence. A terrific wind came up, and I wonder if I thought I had a picture of it here after it was wrecked.
You do?
Yeah, here it is. Later on. Wind came up and tore it loose from the fence and threw it up against a hangar. And here I had a busted wing, I had the whole busted tail assembly, and I had broken landing gear. So I had to rebuild all that again. So rebuild it and test flew it again. And well, what happened the second time? Oh, then dummy me, it's in March too, I fly over Barrington from Elgin. So I sit down on the north side of town, which is all houses now, from Roslyn Road, if you know where Roslyn Road is, just south of Roslyn Road. I flew over a farmer's barn and windmill and landed in the field, and it goes downhill a little bit. Well, it was March, some frost on the ground, someplace I guess there wasn't much. So I'm rolling nicely, made a good landing, I'm rolling nicely downhill, and all of a sudden my wheels broke through the frost. Bang! Down, the plane stopped immediately because the wheels broke through the frost. Down goes the nose, the propeller chops into the ground, the tail's up in the air, and my kid brother's with me at the time. Well, we climbed out there and got down to the ground, and I had to get a hold of the propeller and pull it out of the dirt. And the thing was split, believe it or not, it was split all the way from the hub down to the point. No, he didn't break off this way, but split this way. So what I was going to do then, it was on a Sunday, and they sure couldn't get a propeller in Chicago. They're all closed up, and I didn't want the plane to be standing out here in the field and have the kids playing all over the wings and jumping around on the wings. So I had to get it back to Elgin somewhere or another, and I couldn't tow it down the highway. So it was during the time that they had these here crystal set radios. I don't know whether you know, maybe none of you know what it is. They had these fine wires wound around oatmeal boxes for coils is what it was. Well, by that time there was a whole bunch of people out there wondering here, that guy cracked up, so they had to see that. So I said to some of the kids if they had some of these wires from those crystal sets. Oh yes, they had some. I said, could you bring me some wires and a hammer and some brads? So with that split all the way from the hub, all the way down to the tip, I wired it together, maybe that far, real solid. I'd put a brad or two in and I'd leave an open space and did the same thing. Now that'd be 4 feet I had a wire, and of course that threw out of balance. When we cut propellers over at the factory, they were so well balanced that if you had them up there on a balancer and you'd put a cigarette paper, not a whole cigarette thing with tobacco in it, just a paper on there, and that propeller would go down and figure it's out of balance. That well in balance we had to, if it ever was that much out of balance, we always had to take a little varnish and put on the tip to balance it up again the other way. Now imagine with all this wire and these brads and how this thing was on. If I'd have been my kid brother, I would never have ridden with me. I'd have walked home. No, he was braver than I was. So he gets in the front cockpit and I'm going to take off. This thing was shaking pretty well. I got off all right. My God, when you was in the air, you couldn't keep your hand on the cockpit. Funny, that motor didn't jump out. So on the way to Elgin, my radiator mounting broke loose. The one that holds the radiator up there between the wings, that broke loose and the radiator went down like this. And the only thing that held the radiator there was a rubber hose connections and the good tight clamps I had on it. And boy, I just holding my breath till it held, till I got, and I expected the motor to jump out any minute. So bad. But it stayed together until I got to Elgin. Well, then that's a second mishap on the ship. Then another time, then as I say, I landed here just north of Cary. Because Hotchkiss was going to make a jump, and he said, why don't you come over there, Bill? I said, well, okay, I have nothing to do. And there were snowbanks at that time. It was in March, cold, and so I landed over there, and Clarence Clayball, he had a clipped wing standard, and he was carrying passengers, and he had east wind. He'd always take off to the east, and the high tension wires were there. Believe it or not, the guy with the passengers in there flying underneath these high tension wires. He couldn't get over them, he'd fly underneath them. Boy, that's one of the most dangerous things to do. So then he cracks up. 2 passengers, he cracks up in it. But didn't hurt him much. But the plane was cracked up. Now here they already collected money for Hotchkiss to make this jump. They had passed the hat around, everybody putting coins in so he wants to make jump. So Clarence Clayball asked me whether you could borrow my plane to take. Now why I didn't take him up, I don't know. That's why I was dumb too again. So I said, gee, I suppose something happened. You cracked up one, I suppose something happened, but you wouldn't expect he'd crack up another one. Funny things happen. I told him then, at that time, I said, be sure you warm up that motor. Because I said, see, a spitter, sputter, sure as a dickens if you don't want to warm it and get it hot before you take it off. Yeah, it was cold that day. He goes to the end of the field, starts the motor, goes to the end of the field. Instead of warming it up first, he takes off it. I said, oh brother, here's Hotchkiss in the front cockpit, and of course this parachute tied in the front wing. And they take off, and I was surprised. Oh, the motor was running wide open, running good. But after he's in the upper wings on the other side, the carrier south, all of a sudden I see him heading down for a field. I knew the motor was cutting out. He landed on a farmer's field, a nice open field. So after he warmed up the motor to take off again, there was one lone tree, on the south end of that field. Other space was all open. Here Hotchkiss is in the front seat, and he sees all this, and this pilot taking off, the one that also was flying under the high tension wire, he had to fly it right straight for this tree. And here he's off the ground, but he didn't quite get over the tree. Had he been over a little bit, he'd have missed it. But no, the left wing hit the tree. Down he goes. Oh, then it was really smashed up again. My crankcase was cracked, propeller was busted, two wings were busted, the landing gear was broken, so I had to rebuild it again. So that's the third time that I had trouble with that thing. I say it was a regular lemon. I finally did get it rebuilt again and test flown. Then I sold it, I got rid of it, and then I bought a Swallow, the one that was made in Wichita, Kansas. That's where I did my barnstorming in. Now, before I get all the way back down to there, in my, when I was first flying, I had my Thomas More Scout. Then it was 1927, I think, that year. Then Barrington was going to have a picnic on Independence Day. So they had the Legion, and I think it was Lions Club at that time, went in cahoots to sponsor this picnic. Now they'd done that before, and of course they had picnics at Lake Zurich and they had picnics at Crystal Lake. Now they had a committee that had to get something sensational to happen here so they could keep the Barrington people around home and probably gather some in from around the area. Year before, Mike Rubner was there with his homemade plane, and he was landing alongside the picnic grounds, and that was on the south side of Hawthorne Lake, which we called Otis Lake at that time. That was open field, it's all built in now. Then after he carried a number of passengers in there, then he busted the landing gear, so that was all through. At least there was an airplane there that people could see close by. And the year, I think, before that, then they had the Cheyenne Rodeo King, fellow on horseback. He was doing all kinds of tricks on horseback. So that drew some attention. So here they got four fellows now, supposed to get something real sensational. Well, they had a meeting, didn't know really what to get a hold of. Well, somebody suggested a hot air balloon ascension. Well, who can you get? There's nobody around to get for making a jump. There's a few of them in the United States. Well, the fellow says, why not get a balloon and then get a monkey and send a monkey aloft in this balloon? But then the other fellow says, well, how can we teach a monkey to pull a ripcord? But you couldn't. So they were wondering what to do. Then one fellow got a wise idea. He said, by God, he said, why don't we get some greenhorn to make a parachute jump? Gee, he said, that's great, but who are we going to get? He's there thinking and thinking. That night I got a phone call. And I didn't know what this committee wanted. I got a phone call and this committee wanted to see me, so next evening I went over to see them. And then they put this proposition to me. They said, we'd like to have a balloon ascension. And the balloon's made out of cotton cloth, so is a parachute. Now, we'd like to have you make a parachute jump. I never made one in my life. And all I've ever seen is this Hotchkiss jumping off this plane, see, with the old cotton cloth and a parachute. And so they said, we'll give you $175 for making a jump. I said, boy, that's a lot of money. Those days, that was a lot of money. Maybe I should take that chance. And So I said, well, you give me a few days to think it over. And so that evening I thought of it when I was in bed. I said, boy, $175, maybe I better take that chance. I hope the thing will open up. I had so far for Hotchkiss, but it's way up in the way. So then I called them up the next evening and